Hit a tennis ball. I've got lots of leg strength on the front leg. If my leg is not very strong, I'll fall over on myself. So spend some time doing some exercises to strengthen your legs, and that's going to help improve your game as well. Hopefully you enjoyed this segment today, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this in the future. But if you enjoyed it, please visit us, denvergov.org/recreation. Like us on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. Thank you, and enjoy your day.
My name is Arturo Villarreal. I'm a social caseworker for child welfare. I think the reason a lot of us stay where we're at is because of our passion in working with families.
We try and be the best support that we can be. We just have to be really willing to listen.
Above and beyond, it's all about partnerships and relationships. I'm interacting with community, families, co-workers, so there's never a dull moment.
Explore careers at the City and County of Denver, where Denver works.
Welcome to the Finance and Governance Committee of Denver City Council. This meeting of the Finance and Governance Committee begins now.
All right. Am I on? Good afternoon, everybody. It is, what is the date today? Today is Tuesday, February 7th, and I never know what the date is. It's ridiculous. Today is Tuesday, February 7th. I'm Amanda Sawyer. I represent District 5, and I've got the honor of chairing our Finance and Governance Committee. Before we get started with a couple of action items today, let me just double check on my teams. Do we have anyone joining us online yet? Nope, no council members online, so we're gonna go ahead and start all the way down to my left, please.
Good afternoon, Kendra Black, District 4.
Good afternoon, Jamie Torres, District 3.
Chris Hines, Perfect 10.
All right, thank you. Wouldn't it have been great if I had opened my agenda? I'm right on top of things today. So today we've got 2 action items, and I believe we're starting with real estate. So Lisa, if you want to come up and introduce yourself and get going.
Good afternoon. Is this on?
Yes, you're good.
Thank you. Lisa Lumley, Director of Real Estate. I am here with actually both of your action items today. So the first one will be regarding a proposed lease agreement for the Comfort Inn Hotel on Quebec. So our need for shelter capacity, this hotel would provide 138 rooms that will be non-congregate, so individual rooms, for families experiencing homelessness. It is a low barrier facility where the guests are referred by a partner agency, and this is not a walk-up facility. Our population served, this will support our shelters, as I said, for families. The family is defined as a household with a minor child or dependent adult child, or dependent adult children. And because there are typically 2 or more people in a family, each room of Comfort Inn would serve multiple people. And with that, I'm going to ask Angie Nelson to come up to talk in more detail.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. I'm Angie Nelson, Deputy Director of Housing Stability and Homelessness Resolution for HOST, which is our Department of Housing Stability. And this lease agreement before you today is really in partnership with a HOST services agreement that should be coming before council in the coming weeks. And also ties into a presentation that my colleague Midori Higa gave to the Safety Committee at the end of December about changes in family shelter. So just to give that context. But as Lisa mentioned, this is really a piece of a transformation of family shelter towards a more housing-focused system alongside a more safety net emergency and crisis response. So we're looking to do a bit of both at this location. Whereas previously, shelter had just been scattered amongst multiple hotel rooms throughout the city. This is an effort to try and really listen to the needs of those families experiencing homelessness and bring the services together onto one site within Denver Public Schools School District, and to bring more services co-located on site to support the needs of those households. So a few notes about the types of services offered. We'll be providing both in-person and virtual access points, which is a change in our system. We used to always require that you came in person with your kids to say, hey, I'm in need of a place to stay tonight. And now we've worked with our partners to have more telephone options to talk through your situation, to be directed to an appropriate resource. There's also an opportunity for what we call rapid resolution or diversion in all of our programming. So just acknowledging that sometimes when you hit a rough patch, that you may have the resources and the support networks within your family that just with a little bit of support, maybe help with the first month's rent or deposit, maybe help to reunify with a family member in another city or state, that you would have the opportunity to resolve your episode of homelessness with a really light touch, rather than coming into a shelter system and kind of being absorbed for many months. And so this is a shift to equip all of the shelter guests with that type of resource and make it available to everyone staying there. There's a split in the program, so we look to have half of the rooms dedicated to short-term stays, more of an emergency response, so that the city can be responsive to having a safety net for families, similar to the way that we have a safety net for single individuals. But then we walk this tightrope and balance that we talk about a lot with you all, is that short-term emergency services are critical, but they also aren't solutions in and of themselves. And so this is a mixture of providing half the rooms as that short-term stay, and the other half as a longer-term stay with intensive case management towards rehousing. So housing navigation, equipping our program to provide more support for first month's rent and deposit, getting people into housing outcomes. And then all shelter guests will also receive that housing navigation. So even if you're there for a couple of weeks, on day one, we're talking to you about what's your plan? Where else can you go? How do we help you get there? What would you need to get back on your feet? And so for those who are in the 2-week stay, if we don't have openings in the longer term stay program and they need a longer shelter period, we'll be working on referrals to other shelter programs in the city, or we also will have a wait list for the longer term stay for folks. And then wanted to mention, I'm joined by my colleague Rosie McQuiggan, who's the host family program officer, and she's been really instrumental in designing this program and getting it started with our partners. She also facilitates a monthly working group called the Family Solutions Working Group, and it's this great kind of cross-sector partnership among a lot of our family homeless service providers to help be at the table and talk towards solutions. And so we'll continue offering that, offering what we call case conferencing, so opportunities to talk through when a family has a lot of barriers to housing, to try and kind of crowdsource solutions with that group and think about on a individual level, how do we help support exits to housing for really families with a lot of challenges. Let's see. So this is a graphic that we have provided in that safety committee meeting and wanted to provide here as well, but it just sort of shows that there's sort of 3 pieces to this family shelter. There's both the intake team, which determines, what are your needs right now, helps with some of that eligibility screening, making sure that you have a child in your custody, as well as that rapid resolution, helping you find your own pathways out of the homeless crisis system. There's case management, and then there's housing navigation. And undergirding all of these responses is a commitment towards trauma-informed and harm reduction practices, utilization of motivational interviewing, and really being solutions-oriented with the families, helping to tune into the strengths that they have and empower them towards the goals that they have towards safety and stability. So Lisa spoke to this a little bit, but wanted you all to know, with all the other competing needs in our city, why are we dedicating an entire site just for families? And we saw around a 244% increase in demand for shelter in 2022 from families, those with children in our city, and just a increased need for family shelter over the past year. We really believe that by leveraging this entire site, by having case managers office from that shelter site, from being able to run groups and activities with the kids, by being able to treat it a bit more like a shelter program that wraps around someone rather than just a room that you go to and wait for someone to help you out, that we're better suited to really wrap around those families with the supports they need to exit to a more stable situation. Eligibility criteria is pretty broad, primarily that they meet the homelessness definition put forward by HUD, and so that they are literally experiencing homelessness. And that is our primary screener, is that they have a child in their custody or an adult dependent child, or that they're experiencing homelessness, with a priority on those experiencing literal homelessness. So there's a lot that's said with you all understanding that families who are doubled up are certainly in a tough situation, and that is in and of itself an experience of homelessness and housing instability that the Department of Education and our homeless liaisons have a different set of wraparound services, but given an environment where we have 1 in 3 Denver households that are cost burdened and a greater demand among those that are doubled up than what we have the resource for, at this time we're prioritizing this resource for those who are literally experiencing homelessness, so either in a shelter, in a place not meant for human habitation, or staying on the streets. And so the question, I think I mentioned this already, what happens to those families who are not brought into the program right away? So again, families must meet eligibility criteria, and those who don't will be provided with appropriate referrals. So there are multiple other shelter programs throughout our city that we would help make referrals to. Part of the exciting thing with our service contract is we're having one intake point to all of those programs, and so it's less about calling all around and more of having one singular front door to family shelter, which is a great improvement for us. And to just note that HOST makes every effort to ensure that there is shelter available for those in need. If available shelter units are full, families are placed on a wait list, and then any wait list incorporates a prioritization criteria, again focusing first on those experiencing literal and unsheltered homelessness to fill vacant units. And during cold weather, we expand to other resources not within this hotel to make sure that there's a safe place for families to come inside.
Thank you. So from a location standpoint, this is just north of I-70 off of Quebec on the northwest side at 47th Avenue. And you can see it's a fairly large site in general. The contract terms, so this is in Council District 8. The landlord is Quebec Hospitality LLC. The term would be 1 year with 4 one-year renewal options. Maximum contract amount is $5,840,700. Occupancy could be immediately, 138 rooms. And again, as Angie said, because there would be multiple people as a family in a room, we could be sheltering up to 400 plus individuals. Daily rate is $110. The city responsibility will be the guest selection, meals, and repairs within the occupied space. The city does have an option to purchase this property within the term of our agreement, and we also then have the subsequent renewal options. And with that, the last thing, as Angie mentioned earlier, there would be another action item coming forward related to the services. So it would be a single contract for intake, short-term and long-term shelter support. The award letter is out, and they're negotiating now. So the requested council action approves a lease agreement with Quebec Hospitality LLC to lease 138 rooms at Comfort Inn for a term of 1 year with options to extend for up to an additional 4 years. And with that, I will open it up for questions.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Let's go to first I want to welcome Councilman Ortega to the meeting. Councilmember Hines, you're up first.
Thank you, Committee Chair. Thank you so much, Housing Stability and Real Estate, for your presentation. This as you likely know, this is ranks very high in priorities for people in District 10, likely citywide. I know in District 10 it is the number one concern. We have a lot of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. So thank you for this, and certainly as we have conversations with Marriott and other providers that we're decommissioning, this makes a whole lot of sense that we've got other options. So I do have a few questions. It doesn't really matter the slide, I guess, but slide 4, you talked about short-term, half is short-term up to 14 days and half is long-term between 90 and I think 120 days. My hope is that this is, I guess, semantic, and I don't know, but my hope is that when we had the conversations about safe outdoor spaces, and District 10 hosted the first 2 safe outdoor spaces, residents were concerned about long-term. Like, safe outdoor spaces should be a tool in the toolbox, and maybe the safe outdoor space itself will be around for a while, even if it moves around the city. But this is meant to be a transition, not a long-term solution for anyone. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm being too semantic or splitting hairs, but maybe medium term, and maybe long term makes sense for something that I haven't thought of.
Yeah, I think that so point well taken, and the operative word follows long-term, which is shelter. Noting that shelter is always meant to be a time-limited temporary option and a pathway to someone's longer-term housing stability. Short-term, longer-term, all being very relative terms, but I do hear you, and we can certainly work to make sure as we talk about the services agreement that's forthcoming, just how these are all time-limited responses to try and help a family quickly kind of regather, gain some supports, and get back on their feet.
And I know, as we had conversations about the Aloft, the residents near there said, hey, this is supposed to be short-term, and we've renewed the lease agreement 7 times or whatever. So that I'm just also trying to express some of the sensitivity about other congregate shelters. So you're right, the language should be in context with shelter, which is never meant to be long-term, but just thought when I saw that, I was like, ooh. Yep. So the next thing, you mentioned in one of the slides, does it make sense, or you were justifying why we would dedicate a shelter for families? I would say that makes total sense, and I'm glad that housing stability and real estate are expanding for shelters specifically dedicated to families. We have similar type models for other. I'm just thinking of like Warren Village, where they have like childcare co-located in Warren Village, and it makes a whole lot of sense rather than dispersing families throughout our shelter system. The economies of scale of providing childcare in a one place seems to me to be a smart move. And also, I would imagine that families would be understanding of having other families nearby, whereas I could see that the support network would be stronger if. Yeah. So anyway, I just thought I'd share. I had the pleasure of visiting Houston with you, and one of the interesting takeaways I had was the effort of moving entire communities into shelters. So as opposed to taking, there might be 8 tents in an encampment, instead of taking 1 or 2, taking all of them, and this seems like maybe something similar to the Houston model, and maybe it just. I figured I would ask, is that something that housing stability is considering, or where are we with that?
Yep, be happy to speak to that briefly, and then maybe we find a different time to be able to brief more fully on where we're trying to head in what we're calling our encampment resolution efforts. And so in regards to families, we're so grateful that in the city of Denver, we don't see groupings of families with children staying unsheltered on our street in the same way that we see single adults. Like, thank God, right? But we do know that there are families who stay unsheltered on our streets. And so this is a little bit less like the going out with outreach and trying to take a whole encampment and move into a hotel, and a little bit more broad-based to serve the breadth of need across anywhere in the city where there's a family experiencing homelessness. Our efforts around encampment resolution, we're currently in the procurement development stage to try and get that out and have other real estate works in the works to try and have a location that can support those efforts.
Got it. This isn't my district, so this probably is an easy question for Councilmember Herndon to answer. How close are these? Is this to the 48th Avenue shelters?
Yeah, I'm not great at like distances. It's close-ish. It's on that side of I-70.
It's probably a couple miles.
Okay, I was just thinking because I'm imagining we would have bus service that would go, it certainly goes to the 48th Avenue shelters. Maybe the bus service would also go to this as well?
So currently, we don't have the same nightly staging and transport needs in family shelter that we have in individual shelter. We typically solve needs for family transport to and from shelter by using like transportation passes or transportation assistance. We are just now piloting a smaller route to help provide transport between locations, but part of what we built into our procurement was funding to support transportation for individual guests. But there is a bus line that runs nearby, there's walking trails, and it's right over near the Northfield area, so there's a lot of access to retail, grocery, and also jobs. And really critically, where our previous family shelters have been scattered, and some of them right on the edge of Denver, in this little carve-out for Mapleton schools, we're now able to be in Denver Public School District, which means these families, we can get some scaling of support from the school district on transportation to and from school from this location, and just a lot better experience for those families to keep their kiddos in Denver Public Schools.
Thank you. The last question I have is about security. I know that there has been a conversation in the past about having off-duty Denver police officers provide security for the 40th Avenue shelters. Perhaps the security matrix is different for a shelter for families versus the 40th Avenue shelters, but I figured I'd ask anyway, what the thought process is with security, what if it's needed, and how, what the plan is.
Yeah, so this non-congregate shelter site, so the shelters that Councilman Hines is referencing on 48th Avenue are what we call congregate facilities, so several hundred people together in a singular space with some different, entry and exit doors for client use, but also for, fire exits and all that. In a non-congregate space, this is set up like you would imagine any nice hotel with interior client doorways and really a singular point of entry and exit. So part of the lease agreement and what we were able to work out was to have security provided for by the hotel operator. And so they'll be providing the security, and where Host comes in is through a service agreement to provide for 24-hour staffing. And we actually believe that case management supports and the kind of trauma-informed care that our homeless service provider partners provide can often be as effective or more effective in bringing down crisis situations and helping to resolve conflicts without involving either police or security. But noting that challenges do arise and safety and security concerns may come up, that there is 24-hour security offered through the hotel operator.
Okay, yeah, and I guess I'll just leave this here. I know that there was a conversation about a loft and whether the perimeter needed more security, and I had the pleasure of visiting and touring a loft. Thank you to the Salvation Army for helping with that tour. And the residents that I talked to said that the folks who were gathering immediately outside of the Aloft were not residents of the Aloft, but that they had, for whatever reason, they chose to congregate immediately outside of the Aloft, which frustrated the Aloft residents and frustrated other residents that were immediately adjacent to the Aloft. So anyway, thank you, Council Chair.
Okay, Council President Torres.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Angie, just a couple questions of just to clarify what the money's going towards. 5.8 million is just towards securing the rooms. The food that's referenced as being provided by a service provider, that's a separate contract or amenity. Okay, you're nodding your head, great. And then just a question, it might be for Lisa about the option to purchase. Is it, I do see that it is at market rate. Does this particular lease opt us into, like, can we utilize the 5.8 in that purchase price? Or?
No,
okay.
No, and the purchase price is not set, which we've done in certain leases in the past. We were not comfortable trying to set that at this point, so
Sure.
it at least gives us a first option, first in, and the acknowledgement by the owner that we do have an interest long-term in potentially acquiring this.
Got it, okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Ortega.
Thank you for the presentation. I do have a couple of questions. The first one is actually, so Lisa, if you wouldn't mind, how many shelters do we have? I heard at one point we had 15. I think some of those
So
are
city-owned?
closed. Yes,
And I think
either city-owned or operated, or, I mean, we're leasing out the operations to others, so.
I think there's a nuance in how we look at it. So city-owned, we have Crossroads, 2 on 48th Avenue, and that is it. I'm trying to think of any other owned. That's it for the owned.
Okay.
Then for leasing, we have a loft, which we're stepping down.
Right.
For full hotels, that's the last. And roadway, right, from DHA. So that would be a total of 5.
I think what I could mention, I can get back to you with the exact number because I don't know it off the top of my head. But
So I've been quoting 15 as a number that somebody at Host had said we had, maybe that was at one point. We know some of them have been closed, so I'm just trying to get a handle on how many shelters do we have that are 24/7, and then we know that the 3 big ones are overnight shelters because they don't have space to accommodate people to be kept in throughout the day. So that's what I'm trying to get a handle.
Sounds like it might be helpful if we do like a separate briefing with you to understand.
That would be great.
The breakdown.
That would be great.
Like all the
Yeah.
system versus. Yeah.
Okay, so let me get to some of the questions specific to this one. Kitchenettes or no kitchenettes?
No.
Okay, so that's why the food's being brought in to provide for them. What is the intersection with our workforce division so that with the contracts we have with different providers that help people get back to work, that we're creating that connection for these families? Because I know in other places we've been stabilizing their lives in a number of other hotels that they had been in for a couple of years, but I wasn't hearing that employment connection, which is really critical to whatever exit plan we're going to need to have in place when these federal dollars disappear. We know the general fund can't pick up these costs, and so helping people to self-sufficiency, connecting them to these job connections, I think is really critical, especially where we have access to reskill or upskill individuals to access better paying jobs so that they can sustain supporting their families. So is that something that's tied into all of this? And I'd just like to see how that's all working.
Yeah, so to clarify, these are not federal resources that we're looking to infuse into this location. This is not a COVID response or an ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act response. This is an increased investment of local dollars, largely from the Homelessness Resolution Fund and a leverage of some previous general fund dollars that supported family shelter. To
So
acknowledge
these are general fund dollars is what you're saying?
a primarily homelessness resolution fund dollars and a mixture of general fund. So tax fund, special revenue.
Okay.
So they're not a short-term COVID response
Got it.
like the protective action hotel. So I want to just be really clear that COVID response is something different, and
Got
it was
it.
never a workforce program.
Okay, so what is the average length of stay that people will be able to have in this particular facility?
So it's a brand new program. So average is to be determined. Half of the rooms will be for up to 14 nights, and the other half will be between 90 and 120 days on average.
So that's where that employment connection becomes really critical.
Yeah,
to help them to be successful and, to be able, if the city's covering the cost, it affords them the ability to be working, to save that first month's rent and deposit, and to find housing. And again, I think having housing navigators is a critical piece of helping people find that access to housing.
Yep, and so that's part of the
can-
proposal. If you saw on the other slides, housing navigation is part of it, but also robust case management, which does include really all domains of a family's self-sufficiency, which could include goals towards employment for other families. That's a goal towards education. For other families, they have disabling conditions and work isn't in the picture for them right now, and so it's access to benefits. So it's really looking at individual family needs and wrapping around those in a more robust
So
way.
is our workforce arm being connected to these families?
Are we bringing like Denver workforce? We haven't gotten that far yet. No.
So we have our workforce division within the city. It's part of DITO.
Aware.
And they have contracts with folks out in our community, different service providers, to help people get reskilled and back into the workforce. So that's the connection I'm asking about.
Okay.
I think that's really critical to helping these families become self-sufficient and not be stuck in this situation in limbo, right?
Yep.
So
That's why the providers do that kind of case management.
after this moves through the council process, how soon will the units be available for folks to move in?
Utilizing a different service agreement for the rental of individual hotel rooms. We actually moved all families into this location last week. And so we're really excited that families are already there, utilizing a different services agreement that expires in a couple of months. And so we're using that as a bridge in hopes that this all comes through and we're able to provide this longer term.
Okay, and the last question for Lisa. So if we do not utilize this for the full duration of what's in the contract that includes the extensions, are there any penalties if we don't keep it for that length of time?
Well, so just as a reminder, we're basically on one-year cycles.
Right.
So no, we could, after this year, just say we're done, and that would be fine. We can do it 2 years, but we would not be able to really terminate. We normally would never terminate in the middle of a lease term.
Right, right.
But yes, we would have that ability every year to reevaluate
Okay,
before we
okay.
exercise our option.
And then just a request, at some point, can you give us an update that could be brought back to this committee on where we are with the Denver Post building, and have we negotiated or renegotiated those leases? Because we've had a lot of that space not being fully utilized, as not all of our employees have come back to work.
Councilwoman, you are beating me by about 2 weeks.
Okay.
So I've already got a presentation that I'm trying to wrap
Okay.
up. So yes, I will
Awesome.
be coming back to meet with all of you
Wonderful.
to talk about kind of a larger plan.
Okay, thanks so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. I did have a couple of questions as well. So we see that families, as you said, have different needs than some of our other unsheltered residents. There are programs within the many different offices and agencies within the city to help support that. So the one I'm thinking of off the top of my head is our FFN program that is run out of our Office of Children's Affairs, right? So if this is for the long-term side, if this is a location where, let's say a mom has 2 kids, she has gotten a job as a waitress, but she has to work at night and needs somewhere to, someone to help watch her kids. I'm wondering whether you have had an opportunity to connect like with some of the other, that was a specific one that came to the top of my head, right? But there are many others. I'm wondering whether you've had an opportunity to connect with some of those agencies to see if there's ways to help build in the city services that already exist to help support that services contract, which is really more for the case management side than it is for kind of those day-to-day like needs, right?
Yeah, so, and I wish that the timing had worked out that we'd be able to bring the services agreement and this lease agreement right together. But I have all the faith and confidence in the service provider partner that we've selected and are currently negotiating with, and their long history of provision of family shelter services. So this is just going to be one of about, I think, 5 different family shelters in our network of city-funded relationships. The real difference here being that the city is leasing the units instead of having a nonprofit partner who owns them and operates them. So the city's going to lease them and let a nonprofit partner operate them. But to say that these service provider partners have a lot of those relationships, and by necessity of the needs being brought before them every day, are working on those relationships. But I think maybe a connection with Rosie and the Family Solutions Group, I'm not sure that we have those like Office of Children's Affairs connections built into that solutions group, and would be a great place to make that. I know I'm on a working group monthly with Office of Children's Affairs folks, but more towards the Caring for Denver and mental health services side of things. So I think we're working all the time on how we de-silo city services, but I think that's a good flag for where we can try and connect folks in more deeply.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I just off the top of my head, you know, like Office of Financial Empowerment offers, you know, supports to all residents, but families in particular who are trying to get some of their financial affairs better in order and better managed to, you know, have found themselves in this position. OCA, right? Like there's probably 5 I could name that I just want to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts or paying service providers for things we already do within, you know, within the city. So I appreciate that the services contract is not ready yet, and look forward to hearing more about it when it is. But I do think that that's an important piece to make sure, because we all know the challenge of the siloing of the different agencies within the city, that cross collaboration, particularly for a location that is specific to families, because there are those specific needs for families that just don't exist if you're a single person necessarily. Okay, that's great. My other question was just around food service provide. So it sounds like the service contract is going to cover the food piece as well. Is there a kitchen on this site?
So there's like a prep kitchen, warming kitchen.
But it's not like a hotel that has...
Right, it's not like a banquet type setup. And so this is a point that we're still working out with the provider around how many meals per day. What we found in other family non-congregate shelters is that a lot of families are eligible for SNAP benefits and do receive SNAP, and will bring in their own food. And there are little mini fridges and microwaves, so there's not full-on kitchenettes, but there are ways to store or prepare food in the units, as well as microwaves in the lobby. And so a lot of families prefer their own meal provision. And so I think we're still wrestling around what's the right resource to bring on and not have food wasted, because we will have to do daily delivery in of meals because of the lack of kitchen prep space in this facility.
Okay. Last, I guess, question is really around the, and it was sort of touched on before, but the opportunity, I guess, that we have here for purchase is something like, and yeah, Lisa, this might be a question for you, is something like the lack of an ability to prepare food in the land, is that something, like, would that make a property like this more or less attractive for a long-term solution or purchase?
For the city itself?
Yeah.
I mean, I will just say, I'm happy to have individual conversations if you understand why I probably don't want to go into a lot of detail.
Total, of course. No, I'm just asking.
But what
sort
I
of
will
like
say in general, when we're looking at any location, period, we're trying to evaluate all of the needs that would be optimum, and then working backwards with a facility on whether we would provide it or we could work around it. So, excuse me, I would just say that it certainly is a facility that will work under the current conditions and the way it's structured. For long-term or not, that's something that I'll have to discuss with host.
Okay, great, really appreciate that, thank you. So I need a mover and a seconder, or if there is one, there we go. Moved by Council President Torres, seconded by Councilmember Hines. You have an additional question? Sure, go ahead.
It was just a piggyback onto something that you were asking, and just wondering if around the issue of daycare, for example, it would be helpful with whoever the service provider is. I don't know that it's going to include daycare, but if it doesn't, I think looking at how some of the families that may start getting back to work and might be working different shifts could be like sharing some of those responsibilities. I mean, people in neighborhoods do that all the time, you know, where they work with their friends' parents and trade off, you know, oftentimes it's driving them to school, but it's hours that, you know, they're sharing around daycare services. So just want to encourage that, because I would think as people are stabilized in this environment, it could be a way that engages them in a more productive way and makes them feel like they're being part of something bigger than themselves.
Yeah, to just note, this space is not conducive for official childcare.
I understand that.
And all the different licensing that would be required for that, but 100%, we really, across all of our providers, encourage people to build those informal supports. The city or any nonprofit alone is not a good solution there.
So the Office of Children's Affairs, that's what their FFN program is.
Yes.
They actually pay neighbors to like provide childcare opportunities for other friends and neighbors who are at work. That's why I was saying you should connect with.
Yeah.
And if they could be making some money doing that while they're there, that would be amazing. Yeah. Thanks.
Great.
All right. Do we need a roll call vote, or are we happy with this one? Cool. We'll see you on the floor. Thank you very much. And Lisa, I believe you have a second one coming through. Thanks, Angie.
Let's see if I do this. Luke, I may need your help. I'm just not share or displaying it right. Oh, I didn't even go down all the way. Thank you very much. Oh, it didn't seem to be good. Try again. There we go. Thank you very much. Good afternoon again. Lisa Lumley, Division of Real Estate. I'm here to discuss the purchase and sale agreement for the Westwood Library. So just as background, DPL currently occupies approximately 900 square feet in the Westwood Community Center. This is the smallest library in the branch system. The branch prohibits the library from adequately, or the size of it then prohibits it from adequately serving the neighborhood. It does not have enough space for computers, programming, and community space. And the hours of operation had been limited based on how we were structured with a service provider who oversaw the entire community center. In 2021, Denver voters approved the Rise Denver Bond Package, which included a new library in Westwood. Westwood Redeemer. So in 2021, Lifespan Local, led by Dr. Lydia Prado, purchased the Lutheran Redeemer Church with the goal of developing a community well-being hub for Southwest Denver. Beginning in 2017, Dr. Prado used the community-driven process that was used to identify the needs in for Southwest Denver residents, similar to the work that she undertook at the Dahlia Campus for Health and Wellbeing. The areas of focus that were identified in that community-led process included well-being, healthy foods and space, early learning, discovery, including art and creativity, and lifelong learning. The Westwood Library at Westwood Redeemer. This would, by moving forward within this project, it would allow for flexible spaces for generational education programming geared for family, youth, immigrants, refugees, and job seekers. This would give the library the opportunity for larger collections of books, movies, music, and magazines, and this would be funded by DPL. Greater access to computers, co-created space with other neighborhood organizations, providing legal support, healthy food, and well-being resources. Community meeting space to be used in a variety of ways, including workshops, cultural events, and more. Partnerships with early learning classrooms and support for the youth 0 through 5 and caregivers. And then this allows for the continued operation of the smaller Westwood Library at the Westwood Community Center. So the location is just south of Alameda at Irving. And this is a rendering from the development. The proposed acquisition would be a condo unit within the building at 3300 West Nevada Place. The purchase price is $5,950,000. The seller is Lifespan Local. It would be approximately 6,000 square feet of just dedicated then owned library space, separate from the other communal space that the library can use. This will include tenant finishes. The approximate closing date is Q4 of 2023, and this is in Council District 3. The requested action approves the purchase and sale agreement with Lifespan Local to acquire a condo unit located in 3300 West Nevada Place, Denver, Colorado. And with that, are there any questions?
All right, thank you, Lisa. As always, you keep it brief, which I really appreciate. Let's go to Council President Torres.
Thank you so much. Is the mic on? Thank you so much, Lisa. So I just want to, because this is kind of a different way that we've been maybe getting a library out of a bond. It may be very different from how Gonzalez Library came to fruition. Yep. This one, we are tacking on to an existing development project and adding on basically a condo, right? A library that they will build that we then buy from them that then becomes a city facility. I think that's really I mean, it's not just innovative. I think it is out of the box and really thinking about how do we leverage what's happening throughout the city, right? So just kudos to your team, to Lydia, to the library, Lifespan Local, being able to kind of create the energy and the momentum of a project that allowed us, I think, this opportunity to leverage in there. And so just a huge thanks to you all, because I don't know that community will understand necessarily all that's gone into this idea and really being able to add it into the most recent bond, and that we'll have a library in a couple years in Westwood that's bigger than a 900 square foot room. You know, I mean, that's amazing.
I think it's important, as you point out, that the library has been in conversations with Lifespan for quite a long time. I mean, we've been there to support, but it really was, I think Michelle would agree, very community driven. And to your point, our condo piece is actually going to be new construction outside of the church, but adjacent to it. So they would do it, if we didn't do this, they will still have that. So we are, like anybody trying to buy a living, you know, a residential condo where you might pre-acquire it or, you know, have your purchase agreement in place upon completion. That's what we're doing. We're basically reserving it so that they don't lease it out or do something else with the space, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if I could just take a minute, I just want to give some context to why this project is so important beyond just the opportunity that all of the entities kind of came together to create. But this is one of those efforts when we talk about investing in underinvested neighborhoods in Denver. Westwood is one of those neighborhoods, and this is what it looks like when we say we want investment in community resources and not law enforcement. This is exactly what it looks like. And so this is a library on a campus of community resources that have been community sourced. So the ideas for having a large community room, the sanctuary of the church will be turned into a community room that can be used for quinceañeras, for neighborhood meetings, for events. Early childhood education will be on this campus. A community kitchen will be here. A legal clinic for residents. Mental health services will be provided on site. A discovery lab for kids, and a library. Like, you couldn't dream of a better kind of collection of things for Westwood and for Southwest Denver. So I don't want it to go unsaid how pivotal this is to when we talk about investing and trying to pivot away from the violence that this neighborhood feels, the safety that they're concerned about, and the gunshots that they hear on a regular basis, where our money goes to try to intervene in that. So I just don't want that to go unsaid and unnoticed because it is catalytic. So thank you so much, and thank you, Madam Chair. Just really excited to support this.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Hines.
Thank you, Committee Chair. Director Jeske, I just wanted to say the library is so amazing under your leadership, and I mean, you've done so much for every community in our city and protecting access to knowledge, information, the purchasing in the pandemic additional Wi-Fi hotspots so that our communities, our families, we were talking about families in the last conversation, had access so that they could have kids go to school during the pandemic when we were all at home. And I just want to thank you so much for what you've done for our community and District 10 and Denver as a whole. We are a better city thanks to your leadership. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Black.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Lisa. What will happen to the existing 900 square foot library?
It will continue to operate. Michelle, do you want to come up and talk about it?
And where is it in relationship to this?
It is half a mile, if that, maybe from, it's just off of Lowell Boulevard. So actually, it's probably even less than that.
Yeah, we're going to continue to use
Michelle,
that.
before you start, can you please just introduce yourself for the record?
Yes,
Thank you.
it's been a while since I've been here. Michelle Jeske, City Librarian, Denver Public Library. So we have plans to continue to use the space that we have now at Westwood Community Center. We're actually this year expanding it a little bit and putting in a computer lab. We think that because this neighborhood has been so under-resourced for so long, and because it's only a 7,000 square foot library that we're putting in, just under, that we still need that other space, and that we will be providing complementary services. So the existing library will focus more on computer access, older adults, including the Native American elders that are often there, job seekers, older teens, whereas the primary focus for the new facility will be young families, early childhood education, and immigrants and refugees.
And is the existing library in a city-owned building already?
It is.
Okay. And then I see the image on one of the slides, a rendering. So it looks like the existing church remains.
Correct.
Then they're building this giant other building.
Correct.
And when will that be done?
They're thinking fourth quarter this year. They've already started. That's why I say they're moving forward with their project. This is a project for the community. We're just trying to get a jump ahead to make sure that we can have that specific space.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. I just had a question about the price. So, it's almost $1,000 a square foot that we're paying, and I certainly think that this community deserves this investment. I'm just wondering whether, is that market rate?
Yeah, we do, and we've got an appraisal that will support. I think it's remembering that it is a combination of availability. It will still, have that. There will be improvements that it will come with, versus just getting a shell. So we'll be able to support it, though. Yes.
So this price is covering the improvements, building in bathrooms and all of those kinds of needed things in addition to just leasing the space.
Correct. The intention is not that we're following behind with Dottie then to do another construction project.
Okay, got it. Okay, that clarifies it, because I was like, woo, you could buy it really a lot for this.
No, we'll still need to do some FF&E. Yeah. But in general, it should be there then for the library ready to move in immediately.
That's amazing. Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Really appreciate it. All right, it was moved by Council President Torres and seconded by Councilmember Hines. Do we need a roll call vote? Everybody thumbs up on this one? Great. Thank you very much, and we'll see you on the floor. Thank you. And with that, we've got a few
Items on consent, take a look at those. And otherwise, we are adjourned. Thank you.